Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today we'll Masechtas Shavuot daf Zayin. We are going to begin on Vavam Beis by the two dots toward the bottom of the daf. As Sheishba Yediyah B'Chila V'Chul. So we learned in our first Mishnah that there's a distinction when a person has Yediyah B'Chila and B'Sof. Namely, you have Yediyah that you know that you're tamei, and also at the end. However, there was this nelam ben atayim. In other words, when you, let's say, ate the kodesh, or you went into the mikdash, that time there was an element of forgetfulness. So that's what's called having yediyah betchil of yediyah b'sof and nelam ben atayim. So then there's a chiv carbon called an oil of a yored. Now, it's only in that situation. However, the Mishnah said, if you have yediyah b'tchila, namely, that you knew that you were tamei, however, you didn't have yediyah at the end at all, then a person will be mechaper through the bringing of the seir, which is brought inside, and also with Yom Kippur, it'll be toila ad sheyoyda b'loi, until you know about it, because you need to have yediyah at some point, and then you'll bring an olah v'yored, because once you know about it, then it'll be Yediyah B'Tchil and B'Sof. So therefore you have to again bring eventually an Olav Yored. But since in the meanwhile, since there's no Yediyah B'Sof, so then we say that it's the Sir Hanas Mifnim that helps. Because you can't do it yourself because you don't know. And in the other time, if let's say there is no Yediyah B'Tchil, you didn't know you were tummy, but there was Yediyah at the end, so then the Seir, which is brought on the outside, together with Yom Kippur, will be Machaper. So, Tanu Rabbanan. How do we know that the psukim which told us the chiv of an oil v'yared is in a situation where a person again is either someone who's tamei who ate kodesh or entered into the base of mikdash? B'dinhu hoyel v'hiser v'anish al hatuma. Since there is a azhara as well as a punishment regarding Tuma, says Rashi, v'chayavin nami carbon al shkogas Tuma, that a person is chayiv a carbon if again was b'shogeg regarding Tuma. So we say v'chayiv carbon al hatuma mashe kishihizir v'aynish al Tuma lo hizir v'aynish ela al Tumas mikdash v'kadaishav. So that was only regarding someone who is tamei and who comes in contact with something which is Kodesh or the Mikdash. Carbon al Tuma al Tumas Mikdash v'Gedayshav. So that's how we learn this out. Again, because we have also a punishment regarding Tuma, and it's specific on Tumas Mikdash v'Gedayshav. So too over here, says Rashi, Ma Matzinu Kishi. He's here v'anish kares, when there's a punishment of kares al zada in tuma, when a person does this on purpose, tuma b'tumas mikdash, he knows what he's doing but kedaishav. So it's mamish an isser in which, because there was done b'mezid, so there's a chiv kares, as the pasuk says, yitamu es mikdashai, don't make my mikdash tamei harizeh as haris mikdash v'kedaishav. And it says, yoichel ad asher yitar. You're not allowed to eat until you're tahar, which means while you're tummy, you're not allowed to eat it. So haris kodesh, so that's azhara on the food. Because mikdash Hashem timi v'nichras hari oynish, so it mentions kares, so that's obviously the punishment. V'hanefesh asher teichel basar mizevach hashlamim hari oynish. So again, it's a pasuk which says clearly the punishment. So therefore, so too over here, when it hurt, that's b'mezid. So by b'mezid, it's kodesh umikdashav. So too, when it comes to a person who was b'shaygeg, you had again there was yediyah b'tchil b'sayif. However, it was done all b'shogeg because you didn't know. It wasn't done b'mezid. So therefore, because of that, because you didn't know, there was nelam be'atayim. So we'll say it's the same thing. It's referring to Tumas Mikdash Kedaisha. So the aim Truma. How about when it comes to Truma? It says Rashi, Im achol Truma b'Tuma. If a person eats Truma Tameh, in which there's a punishment as well, and it says clearly, it says V'ah Hashemesh V'Taher, that a Kohen who is Tameh can only eat his truma, like we see in the very first words of Shas, by Seitza Chachavim. So only then is he allowed to eat truma by Seitza Chachavim, the Kohen. But before that, he cannot because he's still in a status of tuma. So we know that there's a warning there, and also there's a punishment of misa b'di shemayim, as Rashi says, umesu bo ki chaluhu. So by truma, she his reinish lo ashkachan oven misa dechayv leha carbon. We don't find a punishment an oven misa dechayv leha carbon. Says Rashi, she'en chatas ba el ashkagas kares, because the only time you have to bring a carbon chatas is if you're b'shogeg on something in which b'mezid would be chayv kares. But when it comes to truma, it's not true, because truma, you're not chayv kares for eating it, you're chayv misa b'di shemayim. So therefore, how do we necessarily assume that just because b'mezid, there's a b'mezid, so to b'shogeg is referring to this Tumas Kodesh Mikdash, or Mikdash V'Kedashim, when we find by Truma that even though Midiraisa, it's true that when it comes to Midiraisa, or B'mezid, I should say, on purpose, there's an Avo and a Misa B'di Shemayim, but there's no Chiv carbon at all. So Ema Hanimili carbon Kavua. Avo Oil of V'Yored, as we continue to Simon Aleph, Nasi. Maybe it's not true. The fact that we say, no, the only time you can't bring a carbon chat, you only bring a carbon chatas is if the mezid was chayv kares, but maybe that's only when it comes to a carbon kavua. However, when it comes to oil v'yarid, in which it's depends on on the financial status, maybe it's not true. Maybe even when it comes to truma, someone who's tameh who eat truma b'shoygeg, so maybe he taka does have to bring carbon oil v'yarid. So midei dehavi shmias kyle. Maybe it's the same thing as Shemias Kol Ve'avitis Osayim, says Rashi. Shavuot Edus. When it comes to a person who swears that he doesn't know testimony, or Shavuot Bitoy, which is again the beginning of our Masechta, the Easter who now be B'Karban Oila Yared. Obviously, our Mishnah has Shavuot Bitoy, and there is a din of Karban Oila Yared. The Ein Einish Els the Dainan Lo Misalo Kares. However, if when it comes to b'mezid, there's no misa, and there's no kares. When it comes to shua se'edus, if you testify or you're chayiv b'mezid that you knew testimony, you're not going to be chayiv misa b'nei shemayim for that. So our answer is Amar Kra ba l'miuti truma. What does that mean? Says Rashi, so it's saying that when it comes to the chiv of oil of yared, even though you can say, well, maybe it's not true that the chiv is only on a kares, because it may be, how about by truma? So your answer is you're right, but nonetheless, because of Gzeres HaKasav, amiyat we exclude truma. So ema bal mute mikdash. Maybe we should exclude someone who enters Beit Mikdash. Dolo sagli b'carbon oil v'yared and might see carbon kavua until he brings a carbon. So kari Rabbi leha the Rabbi doyulamayim miboidos amukim, that he's drawing water from deep wells. So says Rashi, ve'mechiyuva b'trumahi uval miyute mikdash v'hoyav is done kares, since the punishment is kares lo tesagile b'oiv yared. Maybe it's not enough to be able to bring a carbon oiv yared el kavua lo asher lo anishava. Maybe we say this whole leniency of an oiv yared, depending on your financial status, is not going to be when it comes to this, because maybe only by truma, where the punishment isn't so severe, but kares, which is such a severe punishment, maybe an oiv yared is not brought. So that's the question. Maybe Taka to bring a regular carbon, even the poor person. So so Rava read upon this because it was a good learning. He said, Doilamayim barisamukim. Tasanya, Rabbi Omer, Ekra nichaya behemo lama nemra. So look in Rashi. So carbon oiv yared, when it comes to carbon oiv yared, it's written O benivlas chaya tmeya. If you became tamei by becoming in contact with the carcass of a wild animal, O benevelas behema tmeya, or a domesticated animal. So says Rashi, V'dai im ha'isa kaira benivlas chaya tmeya. I would understand that if you became tummy by a chaya tmeya, shenichtav rishain, v'lo hayetzarach lachsalifta behema. You wouldn't need to mention animal. Shahari behema b'chlal chaya, because we know that a behema is in the general category of a chaya. Shnemar zois a chaya sher toichel v'samachlei l'chol behema marfreses parsa. So even a behema falls on the category of a chaya. So basically the question is that why then is it necessary to mention both of them, right? Why does it even mention behema? So that's the question. So he says like this, Nemar, behema loman nemra. So nemra kan behema tameya, but nemra lahon behema tameya. So it's written in both places. So one by oichel kodshim, tumas aguf, someone they themselves are tum and they ate kodshim, as it in Parshas Savas Arain. So malohon tumas kodesh, avkan tumas kodesh. So just like over there is tumas kodesh, that a person ate kodshim betumas haguf. So too over here it's betumas kodesh. So ashkan tumas kodesh, tumas mikdash min owen. How do we know also a person enters the mikdash while they're tamei? So amarkra b'chol kodesh l'siga. It says that any kodesh you shouldn't touch. You shouldn't go into the mikdash. So iskish mikdash kodesh. We obviously are linking the two. So since we already learned out that when it comes to tumas haguf, that a person cannot eat kodesh, so too when it comes to the mikdash, because they're linked in the pasuk. So therefore, the din also is the same. So yihachi trumanami ha'imar b'choil kodesh l'sigo rabbis is the truma. So l'chayra, we have this question because we by truma apparently should also include that also should be included. Says Rashi, dihinami iskish l'kodesh, because truma is also next to kodesh. Dichse b'chol kodesh or rashin b'chol l'rabbis truma shasro l'tvul yoim. Truma, as we said, is also for tvul yoim until the sun sets, until Seitzah Chachavim. For example, yoyledes mimei tahir shlihe tvul tavalos yoim orach she'in lo ha'erev shemesh. The sun didn't set. Maleis yemeha. Okay, so mikdash. So therefore, how you say the same in my truma? So Gemara says no. Hamid Rachman ba. We already excluded when it came to truma that there's no din oil v'yared, because as we saw above, ba bal mute truma. So there's no din oil v'yared. So ema bal mute mikdash. Maybe someone who enters into the mikdash tamei should not have to bring an oil v'yared. How do we know that we're excluding truma? Where it says mastabra mikdash loy matinan. It makes more sense not to exclude truma kodesh shekain bikaris kamaisa, because just like eating kodesh, someone who enters into the mikdash also is going to be chayv kares, as opposed to truma, in which the chiyuv is misas based in misas shemayim. Pardon me. So therefore, because of that, truma should not be compared to be included to be chayv in oil v'yared. Rather, we'll use ba to exclude truma. So adarabba, truma lo mamatina. Maybe we should not exclude truma shechen echil kamaisa, because you eat it. Says Rashi, v'chiyuva alidei achiluhu. By truma you eat it, and by something which is kodesh you eat. But mikdash is a building, right? So elo merava shosh krisus b'shlom imlama. So we learn out like this. It says krisus in 3 different places. The question is why. So achas l'chlal. One is general. The achas l'prat wants to be more specific. The achas l'tuma haksuva b'Torah stam. And one is for tuma that's written into the Torah. Says Rashi. Umidazu nidreshes b'Torahs kohanim b'tchilas hasefer. It says davar shohay b'chlal. So this is a general, one of the 13 principles. Something which is in a general category. The yatzim in a klal lamed, and it is removed from the klal, lo It's not coming only for itself. So ketzad v'hanefesh asher toichel mibaser zevach shlomim. It says that a person who eats from this shlomim, v'haloi shlomim b'chlal kol hakadshim hayu. So v'lo miyatzu. So it talks about kadshim, and then it talks about a person who ate a shlomim. So you had a klal, and then you have the specific. So why does it mention shlomim? L'hakesh aleihim. Ma shlomim yuchadim. Kadshim mizbeach, just like when it comes to a carbon shlomim, it's something which is put on the mizbeach. I've called kadshim mizbeach. The din is by all kadshim mizbeach. Yatsu kadshim b'nekabayis, as opposed to for the upkeep. Shein chayav aleihim mishum tuma. In that situation, you're not going to be chayav and olav yared by coming in contact to b'nekabayis. V'im Taimer says Rashi lama ein nidoinin b'chal prat, ein b'chal mashim b'prat shlomim in midiachmin lo. So why don't you learn out a klal prat that way? So mishum d'merchakim zeh mizeh b'shnei inyanim, because they're far away from each other. Furthermore, Rashi says v'im Taimer ma ben zu lamad to klal prat klal shiata don ke'ena prat. So skipping a few more lines, could go in Havara, when it comes to making a fire on Shabbos, Shanu Aimer Mechalik Yatsa. You say, why is it that when it talks about the Malachos, Losatsa Malacha Klal, and then it talks about Lusavar Eish, which is a miyut, or as a prat. So why? It's Lechalik Yatsas. In order to say that every Malacha that you do, you're going to be Chayiv, Al Kolach Seachas. Midazu Hiba. Havar b'chlal ha'is havalami yatzel hakish aleha v'galos al kol ha'klal shekashem shechayev al havar b'fnei atzma kachayev al kol al malacha shevachlal b'fnei atzma. Okay, so fine. So again, there's three krisus. One is a klal v'achas l'prat v'achas l'tuma haksu b'tar stam. Okay, so fine. Let's look at question 5. Shosh krisos b'shlomim achas klal v'achas l'prat ma milalmid haprat al klal. So what did the prat teach us about the klal? So it has to be like a shlomim, which is kachim mizbeach, which excludes kachim b'nekabayis. That if a person comes tamei, someone who's tamei contacts kachim b'nekabayis, so there's not going to be any din of yared. Question 5b. So he said because they're far from each other. So therefore, since they're far away, you can't learn out a klal prat. Well, my asa karish shlishi. So what is the karish shlishi coming to tell us? So lasuye devarim she'enum nechalim. It's to include things that are not eaten. Could go in atzi marachal avoyin v'katayris. Rav Shimon le'esui chatas hapanimis the saladadich midolesel hu kares the pigol hu adin l'toma. Okay, I'm not sure if we did that last piece, so let's keep going. Fine. So ve'eni yodea mahi. What exactly does it mean when it says achas l'tuma ksuba v'tar stam? So havi oimer tumas kodesh. Again, it's talking about someone who eats kodesh while they're tamei. V'im enu l'tumas kodesh, we don't need it for that because nafli and Rabbi, we already learned that out. So tenu enu l'tumas mikdash. So it was matama the mikdash. Abahama boyle l'ravavodi Rabbi Avo shosh Christus v'shlomim lama achsachal v'achas aprad v'achas l'devarim she'enu nechalim. We learn not to teach us, as this is what 5c is, that you're also going to be it's also v'achas to exclude v'achas l'devarim she'enu nechalim for things that are not to be eaten. That if you come in contact with those things, says Rashi, could go in eitzim shel maracha lavon v'katayris im ochlan betuma chayiv. If you ate these non-edible things, so it says, then you're chayiv on oyev yared. Rav Shimon yom devarim she'enu nechalim ein chaven lehen karis mishum tuma so lesui chatas apnimis. So in that case, you're chayiv when it comes to Rav Shimon. Chatas apnimis could go in par v'sar shalim v'kipurim. Upar koyin Mashiach, upar elam davar shetuunin hazoy b'fnim. You need to sprinkle inside the proiches by the mizbeach hazahav. Fine. So sui chatas benim. Sagad lemino hoyel. The Yom Rav Shimon kol sheinu karba mizbeach hachitzain. Anything that's brought on the outer mizbeach is kishlomim. Ein kishlomim is ein chayav lo mishum pigul. There's no din pigul on it. Mishum tumanami lo kamashmon mechayev. So since there's no din pigul, because din pigul is only on something which is brought on the mizbeach hachitzain, and therefore since it's not brought on the mizbeach hachitzain, so there's no din pigul. Maybe there's no din tum. Also kamashmon mechayev. So again, 5c is saying again like this. Well, my asa karis shlishi. So either things that are not eaten, like wood and frankincense, or Rav Shimon is to include chatas apnimius, that you're chayiv for touching it while tameh. Even though there's no din pigul, there's still din tuma. Okay. El Omer nar dom yishmei the Rav shosh tumas b'shomim lama. Why does it say 3 times? Achsachav achsaprag v'achas l'tuma haksu b'tayr stam enu yediyamai. I know what that is. So Avi Yomer tumas kodesh. If you enu tumas kodesh, then navgleim mit the Rabbi already went it out. So ten enu tumas mikdash. Abhanamim boile. We already need that. I did the boile mechtav kares and Rabbi Vo because avnamim tumois toli sagi lo b'lav hachi. So actually, we already need this. So Eloi Marava Asi Tumasu Tumasai. Rather, we went out a Gzer Shava. Ksivhacha. It's written over here, L'chol Tumasai. But this is referring to Oil of Yared. That's what it says. L'chol Ksivhacha L'chol Tumasai. As we continue to Zion and Beis. Because of Hossam, it's written over there by Tumas Mikdash and Parshas Paraduma. Tami yet oin tumas uboy. So Malhon, just look over there. Tumas mikdash. So Avkan tumas mikdash. Ve'ela ba kat lamali. L'rabas nevelos oif tahar. It's coming to tell you, says Rashi, hamatama bebeis abliya. Somebody comes to tell me by swallowing this food. Shim achla v'nechnas l'mikdash chayev. And he eats and then enters the mikdash. He's going to be chayev when it comes to nevelos oif tahar, which is matama beis abliya. So amrit ba l'mutehu. I thought the word ba is coming to exclude things, not to include things. So how can you say ba is coming to include the nevelos oif tahar? Mishum demiyutahu itor ksiv. It's an extra miyut. It says like this: O ki yiga davar negia in the labar negia lo. It's got to be something which is davar negia. The ksiv be miyutahu. That's miyut achar miyut. Miyut achar miyut elo rabbis. It's coming to include. That's the reason why we say ba could actually be inclusive, and that's what it's coming to include. Question 6. L'chol tumas asher yitma ba man nisrabel carbon olevi yared meheksiv ba, according to the maskana. So we're saying we'll learn how to include tumas oichel b'nevelos oif tahar j'metama beis abliya. Keitza nelanis hatevel riboy v'ha. We learned it was a miyat because it's ein miyat achar miyat elo rabbis. There is 9 namin oy ki yoga. Davar negia in, davar chilaloy. It's only touching and not eating. And then miyat achar miyat el rabos, and therefore that's the reason why it says that. Okay, good. Let's see. Okay, let's keep on going. All right. Says the Gemara. Tanrabanan. So yesh ba yediyah b'tchil ve'en ba yediyah b'saif. So you knew that you were tummy, but not at the end. Sirnas bifnim. So there's the sirnas bifnim is brought, and then once there's yediyah, then you bring it over yard. So Tanraban v'chipar al hakodesh b'tumas b'nei yisov gomer. It says you'll be machaper on the mistake of the tumah of Bnei Yisrael. So yesh li be'inyan zeh l'havi sholish tumais. It could be including 3 tumas: tumas avodah zarah, tumas gerayis, and tumas shvichas damim. So what exactly is this referring to? So says Rashi. Chipra al mikdash. Okay, so let's keep on going. But avodah zarah hu aimer l'man tameis mikdashai. It talks about someone who's matame your mikdash. Begil Urias who said Mushmartimus Mishmarti. Novilti Yasus Mechukas and Huevas Vagomer. Voloi Titamu Behem. And don't be matama with them. And also by Shvichas Dam, by murder, who Oimer Velosa Tamas Aretz. So in all these different three places, by the three cardinal sins, it mentions these heavier levels of sin, right? In which it mentions Tuma. So Yochol al Gimel Tumas Haloli Heisir Machaper. You would think for these three tumois, if you will, these three sins, that the Sa'ir will be Machaper. Talmud Lemer Mitumois B'nei Yisrael. The fact that it says Mitumois is actually coming to exclude. It's not all Tuma, but little Kol Tumois. So Mamasinu Shechal Kakasiv Mechlal Kol Tumois. So Havi Yomer Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshav. So it's referring to Davka Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshav. Afkan B'Tumas Mikdash V'Kadoshav. Divri Rabbi Yehuda. Rishimon Omer Mimkaima Hu Muchra. You can actually compromise right on the spot. Hari Omer V'Chipral HaKodesh Metumais Shal Kodesh. So remember the Tum of Kodesh. Yachal Al Kol Tuma Shib Kodesh Seir Zeh Mechaber. You think the Seir should be Mechaber for all? Talmud Lemer Shehem B'Chol Chatoisam. Chatoyim Dum De Poishim. So Chatoyim, which are B'Shoigeg, is comparable to P'Shoyim, which is B'Mezid. Ma P'Shoyim Shein B'nei Carbon. We know that you don't bring a carbon if it's B'Mezid. So too, Av Chatoyim Shein B'nei Carbon. So also, they're not B'nei Carbon, says Rashi, Yatzah Sheish Bo Yadiyah B'Chila, the Yadiyah B'Saif, the Helam in the time, Shehi Bas Carbon. So it's only in a situation where you had Yadiyah at some point. But if you had no Yadiyah at all, so then in that situation you would bring a carbon. However, there are some times that even though there was some element of Yadiyah, but because there wasn't Yadiyah on the other side, then you don't bring a carbon. It's only when there's Yadiyah B'Tchila and Saif. How do we know if you have Yediyah at the beginning and at the end it's Toila? Fine. Omer Mar, Yeshli Indian Zel Havi Gimel Tumas. Tumas Avodazar, Tumas Gilarias, Tumas Shvichas Domim. So High Avodazar Hechidam. What are we talking about? Iba Mazid, did this guy worship El on purpose? So Bar Katolhu. The guy has to be killed anyway. It's a capital offense. Iba Shaygig Bar Carbonhu. If we're talking about B'Shaygig, he should bring a carbon. So B'Mazid, it is that he did a B'Mazid, so that he should be a Bar Katol, the V'lo Asrbe. We didn't give him Hasra. Or B'Shaygig, so always they have a carbon. V'lo Isiyadale, but he was not aware about it. So he wasn't aware about it. Chesed Aleph. Gilia Rayas, Nami Hechidami, how do we understand that? So Iba Mezid Bar Katolhu, you should be killed. Iba Shaygig Bar Carbonhu, if it's B'Shaygig, you have to bring a carbon. So on this Rashi says, Masechtas Makus can go in Shahargo Derech Aliyah. If let's say you were climbing up a ladder, Omi Shiyotza Evan Matachas Yada, you threw a rock, V'hoitzi Halo Rosh V'Kibul, and it hit someone. So we say, so again, Iba Shaygig Bar Carbon who B'Mezid V'lo, so answer B'Mezid V'lo Asube, or B'Shaygig V'lo Siyadale. Same answer. Shvichas Domim Nami Hechidamu. How to understand murder? Iba Mezid Bar Katolhu, Iba Shaygig Bar Golasu. So B'Mezid V'lo Asube. So again, we're talking about it was done B'Mezid without Hasra, or B'Shaygig V'lo Siyadale. Inami, a third answer, B'Hanach Dala B'nei Golas, then who it could be people that are just not chayiv in Golas because they're Karvel Mezid, Karvel Oinus, etc. Okay, we're going to stop there, but let's see. Question TA1. Ksiv b'seir hapnim v'chipur al hakodesh metumois b'nei Yisrael. Metumois b'nei Yisrael. V'alfinan metumos v'lo kol tumus. It's coming to say some of them you're chayiv, but not all of them. Right? Not all of them. So elu tumois mamatina. Which ones is it coming to exclude? So this we just saw, which is Tumas. So Omar Yeshbal in Inzel Havi Gimel Tumas Avodazara Tumas Gilarias and the Tumas Shvichas Domim. Okay, so fine. Says Rashi. Okay, that's it. So again, when it says by the Sir HaPanimi, it'll be Mechaper on Tumas Mitumois. So it's not all of them, it's excluding Gilurai Shvichas Damim and Avodah Zarah. And again, what was it talking about? So obviously, it's if it was done b'mezid without hasra, so you're not going to have a carbon, but you also don't get killed because there was no hasra, or it's done b'shogeg and you didn't know about it. So since you didn't know about it, so therefore there's no din oiv yared. As we said, even if there's the yediyah b'tchila, but if there's no yediyah b'saif, you can't bring a carbon, as Rashi says, ad shiyoidalo, until you know about it. And therefore, for that reason, that's why that's the chiddush, that in these cases you do not bring a carbon oiv yared. TB2. Benayin shesir hanas b'fnim mechaper al sheyesh bo yediyah b'tchil v'lo b'sof v'lo al sheyesh bo yediyah b'tchil u'b'sof v'nel minatayim. So we say, because the pasuk says umipsheihem l'chol chatoisam, right? So it's umipsheihem l'chol chatoisam. So what do we learn out from that? Mipsheihem l'chol chatoisam. So chatoyim dumid a poishin. Ma pishoyim she'enu b'nei carbon, av chatoyim she'enu b'nei carbon. So the pasuk, this is what I wrote. Pasuk kosev mipshem v'chol chatoyim v'dum a poishin lo'ise aveira b'mezid shehu lo'i labal carbon kamo yesh v'yesh shehu bal carbon v'gam a pasuk kosev achas. Okay, that was really drawing at straws to try to figure out what the right answer is over here. But l'chayra, that's that's a kasha exactly how to read that. But that again, the question that's asked here is, how do we know by Sira Nasmif Nim is Machaper Shiesh Yediyah only at the beginning but not at the end? How maybe it's somewhat that there is Yediyah at the end. Okay, so again, we apparently, because as I just read, because this is l'chol chatosam. Says Rashi, haroy levo l'chol chatosam. Only someone who's fit to bring a carbon. Yotze shein bo yediyah betchila sheinu bo l'chlal chatas ad oilam. So it's not shaykh to ever bring it. So if there's no yediyah betchila, so then certainly you don't bring it because it's not shaykh to be able to bring it. It has to be that there's yediyah betchila. Okay, ad kan.